Hello, everyone, and a very good afternoon. And welcome to today's webinar, which is on hot topic ransomware. Secure backup is your last line of defense. I am Pooja Kugnole, and I have been associated with Veeam from past 2.5 years. And I'm the Inside System Engineer taking care of India and SAARC region. So, just to give you a brief of what all things are we going to do in this particular webinar is we'll be talking about some pointers on ransomware, what are the odds, why is ransomware so effective, and if time permits, I'll also take you to the console and show the bits and pieces on the topics that we are talking about from a last line of defense perspective. Just one more thing, all attendees are on listen only mode by default. So if you have got any questions or queries, please post them into the questions panel and we will take them at the end of today's session. Now, there is a common misperception in the industry that ransomware, yes, it will never happen to me, or my data isn't that valuable, or I have cyber insurance, or there can be multiple reasons to it. To sum up, the current state of ransomware, it isn't your customer that is impacted by ransomware, but when the threat of ransomware has evolved and become both dangerous and more expensive. Studies are showing that the costs associated with ransomware attacks have doubled since 2020. When we think of cost, we have included the downtime, the loss of business, network costs, and people costs on the top of ransom if paid. Making things worse is the idea that the data is being stolen with threats of release and creating additional requests for payments from a ransom perspective. A focus on disabling or destroying the backup infrastructure have been more widely used to increase the chances of the ransom payment. Of course, if you pay the ransom, the odds of getting your data back have been dropping, with the victims seeing the best of 65% of their data recovered. Although, do you really want to trust the recovered data after that is being in the hands of these bad actors? So now if you talk about this basically over the last 10 years, the security industry has realized the modern ransomware protection requires a layered security defense. Now how you can achieve this layered security defense will be talking about it in a bit more detail in the coming slides. While the initial attack vectors hasn't changed, with over 80% of the emails on the internet being spam. So you might have also seen this in your organization happening from time to time. We have accepted that the attacks will get through. Think about it like this. The attackers have to make a very small monetary investment to have an unlimited amount of time to attack you, and they only need to be successful once to make the profit. But defenders on the other side, which is you, have to be 100% accurate on the time to avoid the costly breaches, which is simply not possible. There are certain reasons because why it is not possible. We'll be discussing about this in a bit more detail in the coming slides of why ransomware is effective. But this is why security teams are investing in incident response tools and services to react faster once a breach is detected. But the programs all include the restoration of the data from reliable backups to ensure the attack has been contained. Containing the breach and providing you have to not lose the data means there is no need to pay ransom and hope your data is recoverable. But the bottom line is having a verifiable and immutable backup system as the last line of defense against the ransomware and the modern data attacks allows you to be resilient when all the other defenses fail. So we'll be talking about this from an immutable backup system perspective, the verifiability of your backed up data perspective in a bit more detail, and how it correlates with Veeam at maybe in my slide number 6 and 7 of the coming session. Okay. Why is ransomware so effective? With all those defenses in place, why is ransomware so successful? There might be certain queries in your mind. The obvious answer is malware is being created and is evolving faster than it can be detected. Anti-malware providers see up to 1 million new pieces of malware per day. So even if we were possible to consistently catch 99% of them, we are still missing 10,000 threats on a daily basis. The other issue is Many companies don't look at the security comprehensively or are forced to build holes in their defenses to meet the business requirements. Or, if I have to talk about this, maybe from a network perspective, the complexity of the network, the vulnerabilities that are built in the fabric basically are also one of the reasons why the ransomware is so effective. Based on the last 10 years of the attacks, these are the top 7 reasons the attacks have been successful. So as you can see, maybe untested backups. Customers who don't follow the best practices will find their data isn't accessible when it's needed. The lack of testing also makes the restoration too slow for the companies to financially tolerate, which drives make them to pay the ransom or hopes for getting some data backs, etc. So definitely the testing of the backups is really important, and how we can help you in doing that is basically utilizing our show backup feature functionality, which we'll be discussing in a bit more detail. Alert fatigue is basically during the target breach in 2013, the security tools saw the attack and notified the security team. The team were seeing so many alerts that they missed some of the important ones. This also lead to alert fatigue. Poor passport policies, this is the most common problem in the IT industry right now. Many IT staff use admin accounts for day-to-day work or use simple passwords. Passwords aren't changing regularly. Lack of two-factor authentications can also be an issue at this particular moment of time. The other options are lacking segmentations. The flat networks are easy to manage but allow malware to spread easily. Some of the networks are so complex that true segmentation is impossible, but all the other nothing approaches putting the company at risk. Inconsistency in the policies. Basically, when you move the data to cloud or maybe you're migrating from one platform to another, it is easy. It is not easy because IT involvement is leading to pure security choices at some point, maybe or may not. In some cases, data center policies are applied to cloud operations that simply don't work. And also, the misconfigurations are also one part. So when I talk about this particular pointer is maybe the router or security devices that exist with the default passwords and the configurations. Now to discuss a bit more about this, I was going through certain websites which were talking about the most common reasons of why the ransomware attack happens. So maybe if at the end of this session, or maybe after this session is completed, if you want to go ahead and uh, have a detailed look of these particular websites, we can share you the links. So one of the website that I was going through on Tech Radar is basically definitely the patch strategy. The patch strategy is not up to the mark as per the evolving IT industry. No clarity in the network traffic. So many of our customers definitely we utilize a software tool which manages the network bandwidth, the network utilization, the traffic flow, etc. Is everything handled by the network, which definitely is has helped the IT team to go ahead and have the ease of the network accessibility and utilization. But then the deep level clarity on the network traffic is missing from some point of view. I was also going on one of the websites for the target breach. So I also found out the role of default and weak password. So definitely we all have a habit of having the easiest passwords, which is most rememberable, or having the passwords set uh, in a text file or a Word file and saving it on a desktop, or the default passwords basically that are given by the configurations or the default setups of the systems are kept as it is. It can also be a missing critical security patches, as we have discussed a few moments back. So missing patches basically if there are certain critical security patches that needs to be updated but have not been updated because there are multiple workloads in your infrastructure and you missed out on upgrading for it for one or two devices. This also can be one of the reasons. Also, I was going through Wikipedia for some of the most effective ransomware attacks. I found out definitely some of the examples that you are also aware about is maybe WannaCry. The worldwide, it was a worldwide cyber attack in 20 May uh, 2017, and it targeted Microsoft Windows operating system and encrypted data and demanded ransom in a form of Bitcoin cryptocurrency. Plus, another example is Petya. So basically, a family of encrypting malware that was discovered in late 2016, where Windows was infected and it used to basically master boot the records. And because of this load, it used to encrypt the hard drive and the file systems, making again your data uh, basically ransomware attack. Some of the most famous ransomware attacks were, again, examples, some of them you might definitely be aware about Bat Rabbit, Samsam, Darkside, and Siski. So these are where some of the basically examples of why ransomwares are effective, on what all are the key holes or the pointers which needs to be taken care because and having a successful or a perspective. So if I talk about this particular slide, so it basically talks about overall, we basically ran or took this particular report from Sophos and what is the current state of ransomware. So what are the average ransom paid by the organizations, how much average data loss was seen by the organizations, and the total cost of attack, maybe from a resource perspective or from a data perspective. This is what the attack cost the end customers. And we could see that there is a rise in the extortion from 2020 to 2021. So which you can see that there is a good rise in this particular thing. So definitely you need to have a solution in place which can help your backup data stay safe from these kinds of attacks, and also make it a bit more effective by following certain best practices and having a hyper scalar or multi-layered solution in place for a security perspective. Now, if I talk about this with all that said, I think we can agree that ransomware is a disaster. Disaster recovery conversations are often very difficult to have with customers, especially which those who are not ready to recover their data or not want to make the changes, required changes as per the IT that is evolving. Who wants to admit? Basically, the probability of fire, the flood, natural disaster is easy to write from one location to another. But just to accept that if the ransomware attack hits your primary site, you should have a secondary site which is really, really strong or has the data available and can be utilized just in case of any such kinds of disaster. Definitely, the threat of ransomware is much more tangible as compared to these natural disasters or natural calamities. Talking about ransomware, there is definitely a solution to it which can be have or which can be have place and have a defense mechanism. Active defenses will only block so much, and we have to assume our defenses will be breached or they have already. So maybe Veeam believes that the best offense is a solid defense against the ransomware. Everything we do is designed to help you to build a robust strategy for protecting your data. We provide data security solutions that can help you to ensure the data safety and availability when you need it. So there are several feature functionalities that we'll be talking about it from a data security perspective or the data availability perspective in a bit more detail. To help you to do this, we provide a software-driven platform that allows you to basically protect your data with an immutable storage. So you can go ahead and uh, create an immutable backup repository, or which is basically the immutable storage, and have your backed up data, whatever the data that lands on this particular storage can be free from any sort of these ransomware attacks. So a bit more detail we'll be discussing in slide number 9. So, detecting and monitoring your data for threats, giving you an additional visibility to your existing defenses, and ensure data that you are restoring isn't going to introduce any threat. So here we are basically talking about some of the features, like from a monitoring perspective, we are talking about Veeam One. So there are certain reports that you can basically pull out, or certain changes, or certain uh, maybe activities that maybe are different than the normal ones, basically that can be notified to the admins. Or there are definitely the options like secure restore, etc., which will basically help you to ensure that your backed up data that you're recovering to the production network is free from any sort of virus or malware, and it can be restored to the production such that it doesn't hamper the production network. And most importantly, we provide testing and verification, because paying a ransom should not be more reliable than your backup. So here we are basically talking about our feature functionality, that is sure backup and sure replica, which basically helps you to go ahead and have a verification, which we'll be discussing about it in a bit more detail in slide number 11. So when I talk about flexibility offers, we can do all of it because uh, our solution is created to be flexible. So if you know about Veeam, or if you have heard about Veeam already, or even if you have not heard about Veeam already, so Veeam is a completely hardware agnostic tool and a flexible to deploy tool. So even if you wish to deploy the software on a virtual machine or a physical server, you're free to go ahead and do that. So even if you wish to deploy this tool, or maybe you want to have the target as maybe a DAS, SAN, a NAS, or a deduplicating appliance, you're free to go ahead and utilize it. So it is a completely storage agnostic tool. So which you can basically have your backup infrastructure setup done and a deployment done as per your requirement. Even if you want to utilize your existing resources to go ahead and utilize it, you are free to go ahead and do it. Basically, it lowers your cost, because we do not require to run the separate components that are associated with our software. We do not require separate instances to run them. If your workloads are not much, they all can be a part of a single instance altogether, which again lowers your cost. Plus, there are several feature functionalities like synthetic full backups, which help you to store your backed up data in a more efficient way, making your backups faster, giving you a better data reduction ratio on the backup infrastructure side, etc., which again scales the components independently. We will talk about it maybe from a scale out backup repository perspective, where you have your backed up data stored. Maybe you want to have the one copy of your backed up data on premise, a secondary copy of your backed up data to cloud. Also, the seamless integrations are already there, and that is where it talks about flexibility. Also, from a flexibility perspective, we talk about it from a license perspective. So the immutability feature functionality also, it is all inbuilt. So again, plus the licenses are flexible. So if you have a mixed infra of VMware, Hyper-V, physical servers, cloud instances, all are covered under a single type of license, which basically again gives our customers advantage to go ahead and evolve from one platform to another, and they do not have to worry about the licenses changing or procuring new licenses from the Veeam team. So that is where the flexibility part comes in a bit more detail. Also, it basically helps you to control things like storage configurations, as we discussed a few moments back, which lets you to fit the backup into your existing environment, or not to have re-architect the entire network to fit the backup. The benefits are obvious. So you scale the solution and meet your needs, and don't have to maintain multiple storage platforms, which helps you to keep the operational cost contained. So if I talk about it, it is definitely a future proof. So even if there is definitely no vendor locking, so even if you want to expand your backup infrastructure, you can add on the extra resources. Also on the storage perspective, maybe if you want to utilize a certain kind of a storage to store a certain kind of a data, to for a second kind of a workload, maybe you want to utilize XYZ storage to store the backed up data, you are free to go ahead and have and evolve as per your future needs from this solution perspective. Now, when I talk about the immutability part, definitely this is a part of the V11 launch, V11A basically, which is the current version of your Veeam software. So this is where basically we are talking about immutability. For example, when we talk about the immutability, it is on your terms. So Veeam partners with all the major storage vendors, as well as providing the ability to create your own hardened Linux repositories. So you can have the end-to-end data protection on your data. So here, as you can see, basically your performance tier or your capacity tier. So first thing is definitely you are free to go ahead and choose your underlying storage. So as you can see on the left, it can be a DAS, it can be a SAN, it can be a NAS, it can be a deduplicating appliance that you want to utilize as a target to store your backed up data. Plus, if you want to utilize the immutability capability of Veeam, there is something called as hardened Linux repository, which you can go ahead and create any generic purpose Linux storage. You can go ahead and create enable XFS file system onto it for fast cloning. And then once you start creating backup jobs from the Veeam console, you can create immutable backup jobs from the Veeam console. You can also define the period for which the data should be kept immutable on this particular repository. So basically, you can go ahead on this particular thing. Basically, once it has been defined and once data has been backed up and has landed to this particular repository, it will be kept or it will be stored in a warm state, right? Once read many. And imagine a situation when now there is a ransomware attack, or maybe the ransomware attack has come from a network and maybe it has reached to this particular storage. Now, because of the immutability cap, your backed up data cannot be modified or deleted, encrypted or decrypted or anything basically or modified, and your backed up data remains 100% safe and you are able to perform the restorations 100%. So even the internal team also cannot make any changes to this particular repository once the initial policies have been set for your tool. So they cannot delete, basically they will not be able to delete anything or make any changes to the files except for the backup files. So that is how secure you can go ahead and make your storage from utilizing the hardened Linux repository perspective. Plus, even if you want to have immutability on cloud, so definitely there are advantages of having a 3-to-1 rule. So where you have one copy of your backed up data on premise, secondary copy you want to have it on cloud, for example. So you can enable immutability. Basically, if you have heard about object lock technology on Amazon, you can just go ahead and tick it on that particular S3 bucket that you have selected, and you can have immutability both on premise and on cloud, so such that just in case the worst case scenario, if there is an earthquake kind of a situation plus a ransomware attack and your on premise data is absolutely gone, you have the on cloud data which is still secure, it is immutable, and you can perform the recoveries from your cloud repository. Plus, as per the 3-to-1 best practices rule, so this is as the diagram that you are able to see on the screen is about the scale out backup repository, where maybe you want to have 2 copies of your backed up data and you have a longer term retentions, maybe primary copies on your own premise or secondary copy of your backed up data is maybe on your capacity tier, which is on cloud. It can be any S3 compatible object storage over here. So it can be Amazon, it can be Azure, it can be IBM, it can be Google, it can be Wasabi, it can be any S3 compatible object storage. And plus, for a longer term retention, so maybe some customers have 10 years and 15 years of retention, so keeping the data on this particular capacity tier may be a costly affair. So you can also optimize the backup infrastructure and have pushed out the older files to these gold tiers of the cloud, as you can see on the screen. So this is how basically you can go ahead and have the setup done all together. Plus, if I talk about the 3-to-1 best practice rule in a bit more detail. So modern malware is known to attack the backup layer, so entire backup layer. So you need to have the process in place to ensure the resiliency. So when I talk about the resiliency, that is where we create a 3-to-1 rule for the data recovery. What 3-to-1 rule says is you should have at least 3 copies of your important data, 3 copies of your data on at least 2 different media. So maybe first media is on your own premise, secondary media is on your cloud, or maybe it is on your tape at least, and at least have 1 copies of this in an offsite location. Now, 1 copy in an offsite location, now cloud is an offsite location, maybe you have a DR, you want to create a backup copy job, you want to push out a secondary copy of your backup data over there, and from there maybe you want to push it out to tape. That is also possible. Out of which you can also make it a bit more reliable by creating a backup copy job to an immutable or an air gapped kind of solution like a tape. Basically, you can also go ahead and create this kind of a setup. Plus, all the things that you are backing up, you should have a software or you should have a feature which basically helps you to automate the testing on the recoverability verification part. So this is where again it is an inbuilt feature which you can enable, which is basically a sure backup which can be scheduled as per the requirement and which will help you out by testing it automatically as per the policy that you have set. So these are some of the best practices, the primary best practice rule that basically you can go ahead and follow. Now, as the threat of ransomware has evolved, we recommend at least one copy of the data to be resilient, either through being air-gapped, offline, or immutable, as we discussed. This is imperative for effective defending yourself against ransomware. So, just in case if you have added a zero to the rule because automated backup verification, this particular feature that we are discussing about zero, it basically ensures your data is valid and usable for recovery. You cannot recover data that has been captured incorrectly, right? So this is an advanced kind of a tick mark or a verification that basically can be done. So just in case if again this particular test, once it is done, you get an automated report. Once this test is done, that the sure backup job was run correctly, all these tests were done, and the backup was successful and it can be restored. So this kind of a report which can showcase it to your team or the audit team or to your management team. It is very important to know that Veeam pioneered the automated backup verification and is one of the reasons why we get such high marks in the peer reviews. So the Sure Backup and Sure Replica, definitely Veeam is the one who started or automated the backup verification for this. So these are the two features that basically we'll be discussing a bit more. Talking about detecting the issues with backup verification. You can never have enough visibility into your network. Our goal is to have every backup job done successfully on your first try. Now, to that, we provide assurance that your backup jobs are running as expected. And if there is an issue, you can be notified immediately. So, what this particular Sure Backup or Sure Replica job basically does is, so once your backup job is run, you can define or schedule the Sure Backup job in the backend such that once the backup jobs have happened and they have landed to the backup repository, this Sure Backup job will basically pull out the backup file. It will spin it up in an isolated environment. It will see if the virtual machine got spun up correctly, if the operating system is running fine, if the applications on the top of it is running fine. It will do all the tick mark activities and it will give out a report as we discussed a few moments back. Now, if this was not the case, maybe there is an issue. So this Sure Backup job will basically it will basically see that there is an issue. The backup jobs have cannot be recovered, and it can immediately notify you at that moment of time itself, such that you can rectify the errors or issues that you have in advance, such that just in case you have a disaster, your backups can be restored as per the requirement. So this seems obvious, but it really is amazing how many backup job failures are discovered in the middle of an attack. So if I want to recover any, I need to protect it. Find all the assets, make sure jobs are running. Automated repair of the jobs is again one thing. So definitely someone needs to repair these particular jobs, and that has to be done as and when there is an error detected, basically. Uh, Talking about some of uh, the more pointers, basically, from a Veeam perspective. Specific to ransomware, Veeam can generate alerts that indicate an attack and help your response team narrow down the scope of infection. So there are definitely certain reports that can be pulled out from the Veeam one tool, and maybe a VM level reporting, or maybe if I have to take an example of it, maybe from a uh, VM change rate report, for example. So this is where daily maybe the VM change rate was certainly around 1% or 2%. Maybe there was a ransomware attack hit on your production environment. Now, due to this, the change rate of the virtual machine all of a sudden went up to 10% or 8% altogether. So this is where it sees that there is a sudden change in the change rates and sudden change in the behavior. Basically, it will go ahead and notify you. The notification will be sent out. So these are some kinds of alarms or I would say intelligent analytics that this particular tool has got in the backend. Plus, you can also go ahead and utilize certain tools that you have basically, maybe from monitoring the network performance perspective, or maybe you can check your host performance report or a VM performance report basically. See how many virtual machines are in unprotected state. Maybe there are some virtual machines that you had spinned up from a testing purpose, and it has been, but the project has now been completed, but that virtual machine um, is not being utilized by the people and it's just running there, and you're not even protecting it. So definitely that kind of a workload are prone, the basically the ransomware attacks are prone to enter through those kinds of workloads. So you can also run this unprotected virtual machine report. So there are uniquely 150 kinds of reports that basically you can go ahead and pull out, and some reports can help you out from the changes perspective, also from a solution perspective. So maybe also incremental backup file size. So that is also a very good example. So maybe daily your backup jobs are running absolutely fine, because there are just a change rate of 1% to 3%. Your backup file size was also as per the change rates that were happening. But now there was a ransomware attack and it has started doing some changes to your production virtual machines. Then, due to which basically your incremental backup file size would again go up to this. You can pull out this report, and this alarm basically can be notified to the admins or to the registered email IDs, such that you are able to get a hold that yes, the production has been affected by ransomware and you need to take certain steps for it. Okay, now talking about a bit more thing from a testing and verification perspective. As I mentioned, the worst time to realize your backups have failed during the crisis. Sadly, a crisis also seems to be the time when teams realize there are holes in their recovery plan. Veeam provides the ability to create and maintain comprehensive recovery plans and stress test the plans to give you and your leadership confidence. So our tools basically help you to automate the testing and recovery for every workload. So this is where basically we are talking about the ability to stage workloads prior to recovery to ensure the data is clean and everything works as expected. On the other side, some of our customers use this feature to test software patches since they do not need to maintain a totally separate network. As we have seen more software supply chain attacks like SolarWinds last year, I expect to see more people using this particular feature. Now, when I talk about it, you can see over here you have your production workloads. You are taking the backup of your workloads. You're also replicating them as per the diagram. Basically you're taking the backup of your workloads. You're also replicating them. Plus, there are some critical workloads which maybe out of 100, there are 4 to 5 critical virtual machines, VMware virtual machines, which are really critical for you, and you cannot even have a data loss of even 5 seconds or so. You can also run the Veeam CDP job to it where you are replicating the workloads as low as every 5 seconds. You are bringing down your RPO to as low as 5 seconds and achieving a near zero kind of an RPO using it. Plus, you are taking the backups. You are just in case of a disaster, you are able to see that in the backend there can be any kind of a storage on which this data is stored, or maybe the backup data that is being stored. Now, having the tests in place, having the DR applications, maybe once you're replicated, there is a disaster, you want to go ahead and do the recovery at an entire instance level. You can go ahead and do it utilizing instant VM recoveries, or maybe the virtual machine is running absolutely fine, or the physical server, for example, is running absolutely fine, but just the database or the application got corrupted. You can just go ahead and do a one-click recovery. So maybe uh, from an Exchange, SharePoint, or SQL perspective, maybe in SQL, maybe you accidentally deleted a table. You can just go ahead and perform uh, a table level recovery, or maybe do an instant recovery at a Microsoft SQL database level, or maybe a standalone Oracle database level instant recoveries. If you want to go ahead and do, you can go ahead and do that also. plus saving time from a restoration perspective, definitely generating the DR documentations. Yes, that is possible. Utilizing the VDRO feature functionality or utilizing the Veeam disaster recovery orchestrator, you can just go ahead and do that, which basically helps you to verify the RTO. RTO, it will check if your setup is ready or not. It will see if the licenses on the both DC and DR side are up to mark or not, if the required resources to fail over and fail back are available or not. It will do the dynamic testings, etc. Everything utilizing this particular tool. Plus, from a lab perspective, so definitely a stage restore, secure restore, sure backup, sure replica definitely can be utilized. Stage restore, again, maybe there is some things that, as per the GDPR compliance, that you need to remove before recovering the virtual machine to the production network. Yes, you can go ahead and do stage restore. We discussed about sure backup, sure replica, where you verify that the backups that have happened to the backup repository are successful and can be restored as and when they are required in case of a disaster. You can also go ahead and utilize it. This is where basically this particular diagram talks about. Maybe not that complex, but there are a lot of things that are covered as a part of this particular slide. Okay, talking about the data mobility, of course, all this is useless if you do not have access to your data centers on servers. So many people are surprised that during the ransomware attack, law enforcement can seize an entire data center as evidence. It essentially creates a smoking hole scenario, but you can still see the building. So Veeam's unique approach to data mobility assists the organization to all sizes with their data management tasks, providing portability, protection and restoration of the workloads across any cloud or platform, including intuitive guidance on how best to restore or the archive protected data using the scale options that cloud basically provides. The portability of your workloads across AWS or Azure means no change of format and ability to migrate and simply restore to any clouds and targets, meanwhile maintaining the continuity. So this is where basically we're talking about maybe a primary copy of your backed up data, which is a secondary copy. Maybe you're pushing it out to AWS or Azure. So every format, so starting from on-premise or a secondary copy or the cloud repository, the format of the data remains the same. That is .vbk, VID, VRP, etc. So be it any cloud, maybe you're taking the backup on premise, you're pushing out a secondary copy on cloud, or maybe taking the backup of cloud instances, having a secondary copy, bringing it down on premise. Definitely that kind of a portability you get. Plus, from a restoration perspective, you again have these portability. So maybe you've taken a backup of your on-premise workloads. You want to restore it to AWS or Azure or GCP, or maybe you've taken a backup of your cloud instances, you want to recover or restore it to on-premise and vice versa, or maybe you've taken a backup of one cloud instance and you want to recover or restore it to another cloud. All those kinds of portability basically are possible using Veeam. So be it using the community edition, maybe you started using the community edition from testing, then you move to the licensed version, then maybe you have restored. So once you have taken the backup, you want to restore it to the same location or maybe to a DR location on a different platform altogether. So maybe you have taken a backup of the physical server, want to recover it or restore it to a virtual instance or maybe to a cloud instance, or you have taken a backup of one particular workload and you want to do a cross-platform restorations. Everything is possible using Veeam solutions. So that is what the Veeam data mobility it is talking about. So having the business continuity altogether. So to explain this in a bit more uh, from an example perspective, imagine a situation where you have a mixed infra of Hyper-V and VMware, or maybe physical server and VMware setup. Now you are running some critical workload on your physical server. Maybe it got crashed. Now you do not have any ideal physical server where you can spin up or do a bare metal recovery, but you have sufficient space or sufficient resources available on the virtual platform. You can go ahead and perform instant recoveries on these particular platforms. So that is where using instant recoveries you can do it, or maybe there was an earthquake kind of a situation. You have pushed out a secondary copy of a backed up data to cloud, and on premise everything is lost, everything is gone. You can just go ahead and do the recovery from your cloud repository directly to your EC2 instance or Azure instance, some like that. Basically, you can go ahead and do the recovery. So that is where it is talking about the cloud mobility point of view. Uh, Talking about this in a bit more detail, beyond the resilience, you can also find cloud targets to reduce your storage costs through automated tiering and moving the old copies or secondary copies of your backed up data to these particular clouds. Also, as we discussed a few moments back, you can also push out your older files to the cold tiers of the cloud, lowering the cost and cloud targets while still ensuring ease and access if needed. Best of all, supports for AWS, Azure, IBM clouds means flexibility and no vendor lock-in. So you can store the data in cloud without the need to purchase any extra products or pay any unexpected cloud tax. One format lowers barriers for data migration. A single management experience across all environments lowers overall management cost. I cap data intelligently and maximize the storage investment. So you do not need to have Veeam infrastructure to recover the V. So that is where basically again you do not, just in case maybe the Veeam server got crashed, you have the configuration file. Definitely you can just download the software and basically you can just spin it up and upload this configuration file, and all the configurations that were a part of it you will be able to see. Now, instant recoveries at a scale, as you can see, there are 91 unique ways or different use cases in which you can go ahead and perform the recovery of your workloads. So this is where basically you are able to go ahead and perform granular level recoveries of your workloads. Basically, it can be at an instant VM level recoveries or an instant database level recovery or a granular file folder level recoveries. So your data is protected and you might have a different use case for a different kind of a scenario. Every kind of a scenario, maybe there is a different kind of a recovery option that you require. So these are all the kinds of approaches, all the recovery options available to you at your fingertips while performing the recovery. You have the ability to recover your data to a different location, and you know your data is free from malware. So it's time to restore the data. And Veeam flexibility basically means by count there are 91 ways, as you can see on the screen. Don't worry, you'll only need 2 or 3 out of it, but every option, maybe there can be a different use case, and you are future-proof, ready to have these particular feature functionalities in place. The key takeaway from this particular slide is basically the speed with which we can perform the recovery of your workload. So just in case of a disaster, instant VM recovery or an instant database level recovery basically helps you to go ahead and bring down your RTO to as low as 5 to 7 minutes. So it is not even that much, but you will be able to see the entire conversion happens into in the backend, maybe a B2B conversion or a P2B conversion, and you are able to have these particular scenarios basically tested out in case of you're interested. In many cases, we have had customers tell us that they have reduced the restore times from days to hours and hours to basically minutes. In this case of ransomware companies, they've chosen to pay ransom because the recovery process was too slow or cumbersome. Colonial Pipeline chose to pay $4 million to get back some of their data and use their backups for the rest. We want to change that equation and make a restore process not just the right choice morally, but also bring it right financially choice for business. So this is where this particular feature talks about altogether. So Veeam ransomware solution, that's why we have taken a holistic approach to the ransomware problem. It's not just one product or one feature, but all together a full solution that combines best-in-class technology with expertise throughout your data protection journey to ensure you have flexibility in the design with lower cost, operational cost, and better TCOs, visibility with detection, monitoring, and analytics, having the data mobility to get back to operations during the investigations. Rapid, reliable recoveries is more cost effective than paying the ransom. So this is where you are able to see the product lines on the left, which is basically we discussed about Veeam backup and replication. We do have cloud native tools also, which is Veeam backup for AWS, Veeam backup for Azure, and Veeam backup for GCP, where we basically go ahead and do agentless backup of your instances. And you can also, as per your requirement, maybe utilizing the plugins. If you want to bring a secondary copy of your backed up data on premise or so, you can go ahead and do that. Veeam One is a monitoring tool which helps you out with the 150 reports that we just discussed a few moments back. Veeam Disaster Recovery Orchestrator, we discussed about it from a DCDR solution perspective, where you have four automated kind of a dynamic reports from a testing reports, readiness check reports perspective, and definitely for Kubernetes workloads cast in K10 by Veeam. Trusted immutability, yes, we discussed about it in few pointers from a hardware Linux repository perspective. Backup verification, show backup, show replica. We discussed about it. 3-2-1-1-0 rule, how flexibility it can be deployed, and what are the advantages that you get with it. From a recovery perspective, we discussed about instant recovery at a virtual machine level, cross-platform restorations from physical to virtual or a cloud to virtual kind of a perspective. We discussed about instant database level recovery perspective. Also, secure restore is basically it utilizes the capability of the underlying antivirus software, and before restoring the entire system to the production network, it basically scans the entire backup file such that it is free from any malware or virus. DR orchestration is a part of the Veeam Disaster Recovery Orchestrator altogether. So this is all software defined with no vendor locking. Definitely, we did throw some light or give a quick glimpse on this particular point altogether. Definitely, Veeam helps the customers to protect their data. Not all doom and gloom, definitely. So you're able to see that actual data loss, the downtimes have reduced, productivity loss have reduced, and also from modern data protection is basically you will have a less data loss. Ransomware controls aren't all about detection. Cost goes down as the preparation goes up. Definitely, you need to ramp up and have the preparation done for your production and your backup infrastructure and apply all those new changes and the new approaches that needs to be applied, because ransomware is evolving fast. So you'll be able to see the actual data loss is decreasing from 33% to 25% from 2018 to 2020. Downtime is decreasing from 41% to 24%, definitely using some of the advanced recovery feature functionalities from an instant recovery feature functionalities perspective. So productivity loss is again decreasing from 28% to 21%. So this is where basically we discussed about a bit more detail with it. Data recovery is again increasing and has almost recovered 91% of the data. Talking about learning a bit more about this particular thing, we do have certain recorded webinars and certain white papers like 5 best practices that you should go ahead and do, or you should go ahead and make the changes and protect yourself from ransomware attack. So we do have it. We have this white paper already available, so you can make or apply these changes to your production. 7 capabilities perspective. So what are the 7 rapid reliable recoveries perspective that you can go ahead and apply and have an hyper resilient kind of data protection perspective? You can just go ahead and have this particular thing. You also have something from a ransomware retrospective. So this is where again it is a detailed page which takes you through what all are the things, what all things you can just go ahead and utilize, what all changes you can go ahead and make, how you can utilize Veeam in a bit more efficient way to protect your data. And lastware is basically ransomware protection kit. That is where it is all about. Veeam is definitely hard at work, so definitely if you know about Veeam, so the current version of Veeam Availability Suite, Veeam Backup and Replication as V11A, with all the latest feature functionalities that we just discussed a few moments back, are all a part of these latest um, product lines. So definitely we discussed about the cloud native approaches for Veeam Backup for AWS, Azure, and Google, plus the orchestrator Veeam One and your Cascade and for Kubernetes perspective. So just the last thing, be it your data that is residing on any cloud in platform, you can go ahead and have the backups for them in your own way as you want it. So it can be on a private cloud, public cloud, hybrid kind of an infrastructure. Maybe you have taken it as a service or so. Definitely these solutions can basically cater to you, your requirement, and have your data backed up and secure. So this is what I actually wanted to cover in today's session. So that's it. I hope it was an informative session, and I hope that I didn't bore you much with 50 minutes of blabbering about ransomware attack and Veeam solution. But I just wanted to give you a glimpse on these particular pointers.
Right, Pooja.
So,
We do have question from Mr. Mohammed Amin Anwar.
okay,
His question is, how did you calculated the cost? What he means is, what is the source for the reference that you're providing virtual copy or instant access of database?
okay. So when I talk about providing a virtual copy or instant access of the database, there is no cost to it, sir. So the same license via which you are taking the backup of your workloads, you are able to go ahead and perform the recoveries. Now, when I talk about these are the inbuilt features. So, be it the immutability feature functionality, or instant database level recoveries, or the instant virtual machine level recoveries, or doing the conversions, maybe a physical server getting restored to a virtual platform like VMware or Hyper-V or Nutanix from that perspective, it is all inbuilt in this particular session or in this particular license itself. From Veeam side, there are no additional licenses. So even if you want to go ahead and perform the recovery of maybe on-premise workload, you have taken an image level backup of a physical server or a virtual machine which you want to go ahead and recover it to your maybe AWS account. You can just provide your maybe AWS EC2 instance that you want to go ahead and perform the recovery to. So you can just go ahead and put in your account details in the recovery. You can just choose the instance type and start performing the recoveries to that. So from Veeam side, there are no additional licenses.
Sure. So the next question is from Mr. Sushil. His question is, can encrypted backups by Veeam BBR can be impacted by ransomware?
So Sushil Kumar, thank you for that question. Really interesting question. So if you go ahead with that hardened Linux repository or the immutable backup jobs kind of a setup, definitely you can protect your backed up data from the ransomware attacks. Plus, if you want to have double layer protection, even on premise and even on cloud, you can have even the object lock feature enabled. You can have it the air gapped solution even on your tapes, and all the copies that you have, be it uh, on your hardened Linux repository or on your AWS S3 bucket or your tape, you can protect all the copies of your backed up data from ransomware attacks. So these backed up data will remain 100% safe, and you will be able to perform the recoveries from these particular repositories because they'll be kept in an immutable format or a worm format in the backend. It can also happen that you want to have two copies, both on the immutable storages, even the backup copies on an immutable, basically your hardened Linux repository. That kind of an approach is also absolutely fine. You can protect your backed up data. Thank you, sir.
Next question is from Mr. Sakul. His question is there any measurable for restore from backup during disaster for RTO?
Yes, there are. So if I talk about it from an instant recovery perspective, it is hardly 4 to 7 minutes that you can go ahead and have it. So you can have instant recoveries performed as low as these and bring down your RTO to this particular thing. So it can also be a cross-platform instant recoveries. So maybe Nutanix HV to VMware, or maybe cloud instance to Hyper-V. vice versa, you are able to go ahead and do that. So a rough estimation on the RTO part, yes, 4 to 7 minutes is what maybe we can say, utilizing instant VM recoveries.
Question is from Mr. Mohammed itself. His question is copy data management by Veeam. How does it work?
Okay, so basically, a primary copy of your backed up data is run by the primary backup job. A secondary copy of the backed up data, basically you create a backup copy job. If you want a secondary copy of your backed up data pushed out to a DR location where you have a storage, you want to do a backup copy of the workloads. So definitely it is the license, same license, basically you create a backup copy job for your workloads that you wish to have a secondary copy of it. Maybe you want to have a secondary, else maybe you want to have a secondary copy of your backed up data to tape. That is also possible. You can create a backup copy job and backup to tape. Basically, a secondary copy can be moved to tape. Else, a secondary copy, maybe if you want to push it out to cloud, it is something called a scale out backup repository that you can create in the Veeam console, where in that particular setup you define where the backup should land first, and from there which capacity tier. Basically, capacity tier is nothing but your NES3 compatible object storage, where it should go, and in what duration it should go to this particular tier, and from there, even if you want to push it out to the cold tiers, everything can be defined as this particular setup. And while creating a backup job, you can just select this particular repository, and automatically the backed up data movement will be happening from one tier to another tier altogether. So for example, from premise to S3 compatible, from S3 compatible to the cold tiers, etc. So it is an inbuilt feature functionality, and you can create it utilizing your requirement on the scale out backup repository feature.
Right. So Pooja, next question, 1 second. So the question is to it's from Mr. Narayanan, to simplify installation, deployment, and best tuned configuration and ensure if we provide backup and recover server, proxy, backup, target appliances, etc. It will be easy and ensure best practices in place to customer with some kind of template
Definitely,
configuration.
Narayana sir. We do have it. We do have best practice guides. So if you visit www.bp.veeam.com, you will find all the best practices. Some of them I'll just give it to you over here. Is definitely keep your backup infrastructure separate from your production. You do not want to have your backup infrastructure and the production instance running as a part of a single physical server or so. Plus, keep the proxies also away such that the proxy component should be as near to as your production workloads. Basically, the proxy component does the processing of your data. So this is where the data from the production comes, the entire compression, duplication, creating of a backup file into Veeam proprietary format happens. And then this particular data is sent out to the target. Now target, as per the best recommendation, it is always recommended to go ahead with the hardening of repositories, plus to maintain at least 3 copies of your data, such that secondary copy maybe you're keeping it at some offsite location on a different media type. So these are some of the best practices. Plus there are again several from a core RAM resources perspective, there are again some of the best practices also, which can be gone ahead and had a look at www.bp.veeam.com.
Right. Next question is from Mr. Sakul. Which is the optimum way to restore the backup from data center or disaster recovery center during disaster?
Okay, so there are two approaches. The tool that we basically talked about, it is not just so from a Veeam backup and replication perspective. It is not just a backup tool, but it is also, as the name suggests, Veeam backup and replication. So utilizing the same licenses and the same console, basically you are able to go ahead and replicate your virtual machines between DC and DR. So this particular feature is inbuilt for VMware and Hyper-V workloads. So you can create, maybe you have a VMware setup in DC, VMware setup in DR, you want to replicate your virtual machines. You can definitely do it. And with just one single click, you can just run the failover plan that you have created in advanced. So as per the steps that you have provided, so maybe virtual machine number 7 is the most critical for you, maybe virtual machine number 4 is the second most critical for you. The virtual machines can be spinned up in the DR location as per this particular policy. This is one approach, definitely. A second approach is just in case of a disaster, you just have the backed up data. You are not replicating them. You just have a copy, or you have the backups in the backup repository. Utilizing the instant VM recoveries, you can spin up the workloads to the original location or to a new host or a new setup or a cluster altogether as per the requirement. And the instant recovery R2s we discussed a few moments back remains the same. So utilizing instant VM recoveries, you can have your R2 brought down to 4 to 7 minutes altogether. So I hope I
Well,
understood your
thank you,
question.
Pooja. Yeah, you have covered all the questions. In case our audience has more questions, you can always mail us at nikhil.sharma@vm.com. It is on your confirmation mails also for this webinar. Thank you, Pooja, for such an interactive session. And I hope our audience must have enjoyed it. We did had so many questions for you here.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for your interest and have a safe day ahead, team. Bye bye.
Okay, thank you. Bye bye.